Well, I was listening to a discussion a couple weeks ago. It was actually Global News Morning. My daughter actually, I think she likes the weather person, but she likes the morning. I usually read a paper, but so I was intrigued this morning that I was watching that they were having the commentators were debating a boy's decision in Calgary, and here's what it's about. He decided that he wanted a pair of running shoes that were going to cost $700. And he decided to shovel snow, and that's exactly what he did. He shoveled snow so he could buy the pair of running shoes that he wanted. And so one of the commentators, she said, I really commend that young man. He really knew what he wanted, and he went out and he worked for it. And then the weather guy, who's very funny, he just said, well, that's just crazy. Like, what's going on in that household? That family need to put their foot down. Nobody needs a $700 pair of shoes. Like, that's just crazy. So that was a very interesting conversation about, how to parent. And here we come to a topic of today from the theme of Blessed Are the Consumers, Sally McFaig's book, Faith and Consumerism. And I still remember my brother-in-law who was entering the workforce, and I think it was early days of Ford Canada, and he was a young guy in his 20s. He looked at me and he just said, everything is about marketing. Marketing is going to rule the world. And this guy's going to definitely try to sell me a Ford, that's for sure. There's no doubt about that. I even think back to a fellow named Bill. He was on my personnel team. We became friends, and he eventually disclosed to me that he wasn't really sure there was a God, but he thought the church was a good idea. But he kept saying to me, I'm really distraught at times at how much the church worries about money. Money, money, money. He said, as Christians, as he was wrestling with his own faith and what it all meant, there's like this insatiable need to have more. He goes, I'm just so tired of churches that get up there always asking for money, money, money. He looked at me and he said, I'll get a group of people together, and he was not exaggerating. He said, I'll get a people together. I'm going to buy the most expensive insurance policy possible. When I die, St. Paul's can have like $5 million. You'll be good forever. He was trying to think of a way to solve all these money issues people are stressing about. Well, one of my favorite theologians, we're going to have a picture, Eric, of he attempts to address this issue. Walter Brueggemann, theologian. For us, maybe we're nerds as theologians, as ministers. Galen and I will be in Washington, D.C. late May. He will be one of the main speakers. And for Old Testament theology, Walter Brueggemann is, you all have people you kind of idolize at some point. I think Walter, for his brilliance, I want to share some of his thinking today on the Ten Commandments. So I just wanted to show his picture, because what I share right now is significantly of his thinking. He calls them the Big Ten. The commandments are rules by which to celebrate the recent emancipation, the freedom from Egypt. So what Walter is suggesting is the term Egypt for God's people is a terrifying word. That just means you're trapped, you're enslaved. Not only that, Pharaoh means, in the time of God's people in Israel, a brutal concentration of power and wealth. And it overwhelms God's people. There's not enough food for them, there's not enough land, everything is basically all around the Pharaoh's power. The Pharaoh isn't even named, Brueggemann says, because the Pharaohs come and go, but they constantly are the ones that terrify the people. And so in being set free from Egypt and the Pharaohs, Israel is being given a blessing, actually, of these commandments. They declare really new possibilities for life outside the pressure of the Pharaoh, the greed of the Pharaoh. And the arrival of Jesus thousands of years later, in other words, Brueggemann would say, is the end to the rat race. You don't have to fear anymore. You don't have to long for that insatiable need for greed. You can let it go. So here's Brueggemann's 3 tips for Lent. Lent is a time, as he says, that we're to transfer our lives from the power of the world, those who want to market us and convince us what we need, and the power of the pharaohs of our world. We want to transfer it into a new power. It's the power of God's love. And so he suggests that let's begin with consumerism. There's this sense that consumerism tells us we need to work harder to avoid scarcity. That, and in fact, that we almost can't work enough because we always have to succeed and make more. So we extend ourselves. We exhaust ourselves. And I hear this from my partner over and over again. You know, there's always a shortage of nurses. There's always people that are getting sick. And we hear this from many walks of life. There never seems to be enough money to address the care, but not just of others, but of ourselves. So Brueggemann wants us to, first of all, as a goal in this Lent, stand up to consumerism. What does that mean to the $700 pair of running shoes? Well, I guess for that young man who I've never met, I'd certainly have some significant questions to be asking him of what that $700 pair of running shoes means to him. Secondly, Brueggemann says the work of Lent requires a glad reflection on an alternative that Jesus invites us to. The invitation that Jesus offers us is to follow me, to follow him, he says. In following him, that means we're not going to be afraid. We're not going to worry about money. We're going to imagine that there is enough loaves and fish for everyone. We're going to trust that we can even reach out to the lepers and healing can surprise us. And most of all, too, that we're going to forgive. Not just once, 7 times 7 times 7, and on. That we're going to be generous towards our neighbors. As Brueggemann says, Jesus wasn't crucified because he was a nice guy. He was crucified by the powers of that time because he offered an alternative way. He challenged the Pharaoh of his time. And thirdly, in this season of Lent, he challenges us to address a discipline that we all need to have in our life to face the addictions that are part of everybody's life at some level. Listening to a younger woman recently on CBC, she has introduced this coming Friday. It's called Digital Detox. I find it fascinating that there was no comment about religion in her decision, but it happens to follow the Sabbath of the Jewish faith. It's this Friday at sundown to Saturday at sundown. She is challenging across Canada for people to unplug from their computers and their phones. And she's first to admit that she's addicted to her phone. She wakes up in the morning to tweet, and she wakes up to check everything. And she was making a comment on the streets of Toronto recently. She was on a streetcar, and she noticed that everyone on the streetcar, everyone had their face into their phones. So she quickly sent a tweet out commenting on this, and she got a tweet right back. And the tweet back was a black and white picture of a streetcar in Toronto years and years ago, and everybody was reading the newspaper. She says, I recognize that digital means for many people, that's where I do my reading. A lot of people do their reading now. But she still wanted to acknowledge that people like herself, she called it actually a phobia of missing out. There's a term for it, I forget, but that you're going to miss out on the latest news and on the latest tweet. And you just got to be there, like it's an addiction. So she goes on to say in the interview, all her vacation time now, no phone, totally. She said that in this interview, she was going to go off and snowboard for the day, and probably in BC. And she said, I put it on airplane mode. If I lose my kids, I can turn it back on to find them, but I'm not going to be addicted to the sounds of people searching out for me. Brueggemann is challenging us to address the addictive habits of our life. And he goes on to say, message to John Benham, Lent, discipline is not about giving up chocolate. Although I'm learning lots about that. It's about giving up the expectations of a Pharaoh and embracing new disciplines of neighborliness, of justice, generosity, and hospitality. It's about, of course, taking up these incredible teachings of Jesus: neighborliness, justice, generosity, hospitality. It's the work that all of us are challenged to practice in this season of Lent. Yes, the Ten Commandments, they are a gift to help us to realize the importance of being in relationship with God and with one another. And Jesus, as Bergman says, ups the ante to summon it to be even more serious in the way we love God, we love our neighbor, we love ourselves. So I kind of want to close with Sally McFaig's wonderful quote, and I think the best way is just to read it as opposed to trying to paraphrase it. She's trying to capture in ways what Brueggemann's saying. She's saying it in the context that we're all interconnected. Humanity, the planet, of course, animals, that the Blessed Consumer's book is challenging us to look at the importance of how we're all connected. So let me read this for you. She says, I think it's no accident that the moments in our lives we describe as moments of illumination, perhaps the birth of a child, a fleeting connection with the eyes of another animal, a vision of a mountain that blows us away, a hand reaching out to us when we are sinking fast, are never isolating experiences. These liminal moments when the mist seems to clear and we see what life is all about are never just about me, but they're always about others that make up the world, be they human, creature, or mineral. In the beginning was relationship, says Martin Buber, the great theologian, someone who called trees thou. And whether one is a cosmologist studying the beginnings of the universe, a naturalist listing the 42 species of birds of paradise, or a theologian discussing the radical relational love within the Trinity, all would agree that the present dominant model of radical individualism that controls our economy, our family relations, our democracies, and most of all, advertising, all advertising, Sally McFaig says, is false. This is all false. This is all being conjured up in our mind to convince ourselves we need to have more, and we are judged by either the kind of house or car or the clothes we wear. I want to conclude with this. I remember one of the most successful people. I kind of idolize this person. They've achieved great success in their life. They're a good human being. They've done very well. And I don't think I've ever forgot this moment, though, when he said to me that for all the success in his life and all the journeys he's lived in his life, probably the most unforgivable moment was the moment his dad died. And he said he still remembers putting his hand on his father's chest. And he smiled at me. He said, yeah, my dad always had a hairy chest, but I put my hand on my dad's chest as he breathes his last breath. And he looked at me and he said, I don't even know where it came from, but it's something I didn't usually say, but I said, Daddy. And he said, I repeated that many times. It's interesting that Jesus actually refers to Abba as his God as his daddy. And he said to me, no matter what I've experienced in my life, when I think about the gift that my father gave me in the midst of his death, he said that was an ever-changing moment in my life. to place my hand on my dad's chest and say, "Daddy."